Hi, I'm David Moskowitz, and we're here with the CEO of ADVENTRX Pharmaceuticals, Brian Culley. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about ADVENTRX and the lead programs that you guys are pursuing.
So ADVENTRX is a public pharmaceutical company. We're based out of San Diego, and our lead program is called ANX188. It's an antithrombotic and rheologic polymer that we're going to be testing first in sickle cell disease.
Okay, now that's a lot of technical talk. Tell us exactly what it does. Sickle cell disease, could you explain that and how 188 works?
Certainly. 188 is a long polymer, and it has this interesting property of being able to bind to dysfunctional portions of your circulatory system. So if you have a cell that is damaged and expressing hydrophobic domains, as they're called, 188 can bind there and restore the integrity of that cell membrane with its environment. The reason why that's important is that that cell can now, when bound to 188, flow through the circulatory system in a much more facile manner, and it can then deliver the oxygen that needs to get to the tissues. So we have an agent that improves blood flow and helps perfuse tissues with oxygen.
Very good. And what stage of development is ANX188 in?
ANX188 has been tested in a number of different indications and a number of clinical trials. The current plan is for us to initiate a phase 3 study in sickle cell disease patients later this year.
And Brian, when do you think we'll see data from that phase 3 study?
The size of that study is going to be approximately 350 to 400 patients. We estimate it's going to take in the order of about 24 months to enroll the full complement.
There's some skepticism about ANX188. The drug had failed in a prior trial with a prior company. Tell us what you learned when you analyzed the data from that prior phase 3 study, and what have you done differently in this trial that you think will enable it to succeed?
I think there's a very important distinction to make there around the term failure. Drugs can fail because they fail to have activity, or drugs can fail because the design of the study, the experiment which was conducted, was not optimal. We believe very strongly that the study that was conducted previously with this drug was not adequately designed and was not adequately powered. So we are looking to repeat what was done previously, but we're making some improvements. We have sufficient power in the study, meaning we have a large number of patients that will lead us to have more conviction in the data and the outcome of that trial. And we also are making some changes sort of at the margin on how we are running the study. We've gone out to the community of physicians who treat sickle cell patients to really understand how are patients being treated so that we can make sure that we have a design that's optimal to reveal the benefit of the drug.
So going back to the prior phase 3 study, what did you see there that gave you confidence that this drug did have activity and that by powering it up and redesigning it, you could see success in a follow-on trial?
Curiously, the last study that was conducted was underpowered by virtue of not having enough patients. They originally had planned for 350 patients, but they only put 250 patients on study. The company, frankly, just ran out of money to fund their trial. That is an easy fix to just continue their study, continue to raise the capital needed to make sure you get all of your patients on. But even though they only administered the drug to 250 instead of 350 patients, they still very nearly succeeded. So it was very interesting to us to see that in a study that was underpowered and really was not optimally designed, they still very nearly reached the threshold of success which is needed for FDA approval.
So it sounds like there's good evidence that the drug has activity and could succeed this time.
I think we can say unequivocally that the drug improves blood flow. The challenge, of course, is showing that better blood flow has a relevant clinical outcome, but that's why you do the study. We will show that there is a clinically meaningful benefit from improving blood flow.
And let's talk about the payoff of backing up and running another phase 3 trial for ANX188. What does the market look like for sickle cell disease, and how big could a product like this be?
I think it'd be very meaningful, especially to a small company. There are about 100,000 patients in the U.S., so although we think of orphan drugs as having small patient populations, 5,000 or 10,000 patients, there are about 100,000 sickle cell patients. So even though it qualifies for orphan drug status, there's quite a large number of patients, and there is nothing that is done today to help them. There are no drugs that can intervene on a crisis and shorten the length of that crisis and get patients out of their crisis sooner.
Is the drug life-saving?
I believe that it is life-saving because if you can improve blood flow and you can shorten the duration of a crisis, you can preserve organ function, you can prevent necrotic tissue from developing. That ultimately is what's killing patients. Over time, a little bit of death in the organs, the brain, the spleen, the lungs, it accumulates, and the average life expectancy for sickle cell patients is in the 40s. So they are dying from this aggregation of organ dysfunction. And if you can interrupt that process, I believe you are going to have an effect on overall survival. But for us, initially, we're just looking to demonstrate that we can shorten the duration of one of these painful crises.
What kind of therapies would compete with ANX188?
There are a number of drugs in development today for sickle cell disease. Each of them has its own particular mechanistic approach. We're focusing on flow, blood flow, adhesion of cells to each other, adhesion of cells to other cells. There are other approaches. You can increase fetal hemoglobin. You can affect the oxygen binding of hemoglobin. There are a lot of interesting approaches being done. For the most part, I believe that these are synergistic. There are a small number of companies that are also working on improving blood flow, but seeing as we're going into a phase 3 this year, we've got a pretty good leg up on them.
Right. And when we think about companies that are redoing prior clinical trials, a lot of times we see them focusing in on a segment of the patient population. Is the design of the new phase 3 trial for a segment of patients, or does it still address the broad population of sickle cell disease?
So the conduct of the study and the details of the clinical trial haven't yet been announced, but we have seen some very interesting things from the prior data. In particular, kids seem to respond very well to the drug. It may be that kids are simply getting in and getting access to care earlier, and therefore they're getting a benefit sooner from the drug. We also saw a benefit in patients that were on concomitant hydroxyurea, and that's an interesting area, but we will soon be announcing what the details of our trial are and look forward to sharing that with everyone.
And are you willing to say whether or not it addresses the broad population, or you're still holding that close at this point?
I think it's interesting that there's a dearth of useful therapies for sickle cell disease. To date, there's only one approved drug, and we've known about this disease for more than 100 years. So I think that there's probably going to be a lot of interest in this drug, but ultimately when we announce the clinical design, there'll be a label that is specific to a certain population.
So because of the history of ANX188, the drug's been out there. Can you talk about the intellectual property around the product candidate?
Yeah, the drug has been developed for a number of years. The barrier to protection that's most important for us is orphan drug status. That gives us 7 years of exclusivity here in the U.S.
Great. And is there an opportunity to bring ANX188 out overseas?
Oh, absolutely. We would like to go outside of the U.S. There are large populations in Western Europe and in South America. And we're also looking at some other indications. We think that we can exploit the benefits of improved blood flow in other areas as well.
So you own the global rights to ANX188?
That's correct. When we acquired a small private company that had the rights to this program, we took it on worldwide.
And in Europe, what is the exclusivity status of the product there?
We'll be seeking orphan drug exclusivity in Europe. There's a large patient population over there as well. And we've recently submitted some additional patents, so there may be some things that we are able to claim to help protect our drug in other areas as well.
And based on what you guys get out of the next phase 3 trial, is there an opportunity to further the intellectual property position of 188?
Oh, I think absolutely. One of the problems with this drug many years ago was that it had a toxicity that was associated with how it was manufactured. It's manufactured in a completely different way today, and that's proprietary to us. It follows a technique called supercritical fluid extraction. It's a little bit on the edge, but that is an area where we've got some good protections as well. It's very difficult to copy.
And let's spend a moment talking about your other earlier stage programs. Can you highlight for us what's important there?
Yeah, we have a pipeline of programs. 188 is our lead program, but we also have 2 oncology reformulation drugs that are at various stages of development. They're relatively late stage. We have been looking at partnership opportunities for those programs. They're quite interesting to us, but currently our core interest is around ANX188.
So the resources that you have today are primarily being focused on 188's development and eventual commercial rollout.
That's correct.
And on that note, let's talk a little bit about the balance sheet and your plans going forward. How is the company capitalized, and how is cash being used today?
The company has an excellent cash position. Our last reported quarter, we said that we had $43 million on the balance sheet. The cost of this clinical trial is something north of $15 million. So we're in a very good cash position. We don't have an urgent need. We're going to be able to execute against our business plan for quite some time.
Very good. And I noticed in the news recently, you hired some new key executives at the firm. Can you talk about who they are and what their roles will be?
Yeah, of course. It's very important always to be careful on how you add new employees and staff. We went through a pretty exhaustive process, and we've recently announced that we have hired a Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Santosh Vedakatan. He has a tremendous amount of relevant experience to us, and he's had a lot of success getting products approved. So he's a wonderful addition to the team to help guide that phase 3 and some of the other things that we're doing with 188. And we also recently announced, in addition to our board of directors, Dr. Ted Love, who is coming to us previously from ADVENTRX Pharmaceuticals. And we think Ted's going to bring a lot of, again, clinical, regulatory, and medical insight to the board level oversight.
Certainly, ADVENTRX has been a success story, and to see Ted join the board, I think, is impressive.
I thank you for that. I think there's no better sign to bring in people who have been associated with success previously, because they know what it looks like.
And so just lastly, what is the strategic outlook for ADVENTRX, assuming ANX 188 is a success?
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting for us because companies often follow one of two paths. They either move independently and they launch products and they own and retain those rights and enjoy the benefits thereof. But sometimes they follow a different path where a larger pharmaceutical partner comes in and either partners the rights to the drugs or outright acquires the company. At the end of the day, I don't own the company. My stockholders own the company, and I need to deliver to them a return on their investment. So whether that means we get acquired or we do a partnership or we go independently and we retain all of those rights, we're going to try to do what's best for our stockholders.
Do you think 188, if fully developed, could be an attractive asset for a larger drug company?
Absolutely, particularly if fully developed. Some of the other indications that are interesting are things such as acute myocardial infarction, stroke, hemorrhagic shock. These are huge, huge opportunities. So, yeah, I do think that 188 could be quite compelling to a large pharma.
Very good. Well, we want to thank Brian Culley for joining us today at ADVENTRX, and we look forward to your progress and success.
Thanks for watching us, David. Appreciate it.